This story begins with rain and a few people lying on the ground. Among them, it seemed there was only one survivor. That tired young man looked at the people on the ground with a sad expression, for all of them had been taken down. Only he was still standing. He didn't seem to accept that tragic ending. Looking around, all he saw on that vast horizon were piled up bodies. Even after everything he had been through, that didn't feel like a victory. He was still grieving when he heard a voice. Then he quickly turned to see what it was about. The voice couldn't believe there was such a powerful human. Despite being very tired, that young man still had the strength to feel contempt for that being. He was standing on what looked like a giant with wings and horns, the Ryut. 20 years ago, after showing himself to the Empire for unknown reasons, he caused destruction. He was the last of his kind. That lonely man in the rain, feeling anger and contempt, stood on that giant. He told him that half the Empire had become a graveyard, and it was because of him. He just didn't know why he was still alive. The giant didn't seem to have much longer and would soon be going to his side. The young man thought it was better that way, since his friends who had died earlier might be waiting for him. The Ryut wanted to know who those friends were. The young man replied they were the other two who had come before him. One of them, the hot-tempered red dragon, ended up as crackling meat, and the other, an old man named Loron, sealed him away for eternity. The Ryut asked him not to hide the truth. He said that star children share their feelings with each other. He said he already knew the opponents had annihilated each other. He already knew there were no more people as strong as him there. The young man told him to shut up, because he was still alive. The giant knew his time was already coming. The Ryut knew that if he had tried harder, realized his abilities, and focused on training, he would have become an even greater obstacle. The young man thought that guy, until the very end, was being arrogant. The giant didn't need to say anything. The boy already knew his life hadn't been the best. He just wanted him to shut up and leave. The giant thought he was a good human. He could be proud of that. The young man had that weapon in hand and was preparing to strike the final blow. But the giant looked at him and said that, in the end, his world would be swallowed and disappear by the starlight. Those were his last words, because that young man ended him. Now that the giant had his head separated from his body, that young man thought he was the only survivor on that battlefield. He was already deeply discouraged, for he couldn't change anything he had done. All of that had already happened. His steps in the puddles of rain and the despair of being alone made him start to recall when he still had friends. He remembered his companions as a last resort. It's like he's saying goodbye to that universe. As much as he had good memories, when he looked around, the bodies there, of the people he loved, didn't let him be at peace. Even now, all of them part of that pile of bodies, he had still been there. He didn't understand what kind of pride could make people fight to the death. He thought the friends should have just accepted each other's weaknesses and given up. All of them could defend the aura of the strongest sword, but he wondered why his was the only one that managed to. That's the only reason he, a soldier in training, was able to stand on the front lines. And if not for that, they would have died first. He was very sad and depressed. He was on his knees and seemed like he was just waiting for his own end. He thought he heard someone. His eyes regained a glimmer of hope. Someone said they couldn't move due to injuries. He was trying to figure out where the voice was coming from. He was sure there was someone there. He leaned on the sword to stand up. After that, he went looking for the one who was still alive. He searched among those piled up bodies until he seemed to see someone. It was a woman leaning against a large rock. She appeared to have a serious injury. Her face lit up when she realized there was someone else alive, and it was the great commander. Despite looking and seeing the amputated arm, she showed no sign of pain. She was Daishan. She was deeply sorry knowing that Ondan wouldn't hold on much longer. He wanted to know what had happened to her, since she was in command. And she reminded him he was just a corporal. She had something more important. She wanted to know if the Ryut was already dead. Ronan replied yes, and that he himself had taken him down. He said the body wasn't far from there. She said she understood. He kept watching her expression when she found out he was gone. She took a deep breath, crying, and thanked Corporal Ronan. He was just watching her sigh in relief and cry with emotion. Trying to be kind, he said that if she was truly grateful, then she could listen to his request. He knew the fallen soldiers were burned or left behind, and asked that, this time, they be treated well. She wasn't sure if she could fulfill that. She thought he was better off than she was, so he could do it himself. She asked how he could, and started coughing a lot. He was also quite injured. He joked, smiled, showed his hands, and said he wasn't more alive than she was. He said he could leave at any moment. Even though he had just been wandering around, he thought it was a bit unfair to go like that. She left the question in the air. If he survived, was there something he'd like to do? He said he had many things. Looking up, he said he could only think of one thing. He wondered what it would have been like if he had gone to the academy. That question surprised her. Ruth had said something to him, and he was still disturbed by it. But, to him, the most important thing was his sister's wish for him to go to the academy. However, he knew he would soon return to join his family. The commander said that, when the rain stopped, the search party would come for him. However, he said it was a lost cause. Ronan thought she kept saying senseless things. And there, the rain continued. Now, it seemed like the last drops of it. The two realized that the rain had stopped. A storm like that had suddenly come to an end. He began to feel a pressure coming from above. They were feeling a very heavy aura approaching from there. A very bright light took over everything, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. No matter how much he looked, he wouldn't believe what his eyes were revealing. Now there was a giant in front of him with 8 wings. It wasn't just one. There were several. That place was infested with them, with their huge wings. He wanted to know what those things were, and where they had all come from. The commander couldn't believe those 3 giants were the last ones. Daishan was upset, as it was the 3rd time she had tried, in vain, to save the whole world. She was distant, thinking she had only one last chance to start everything over. That's when she began to hear him. Ronan was calling her because she was lost in thought. He asked her to come back to herself and quickly use telekinesis, or anything else that could throw him upward. She couldn't believe that, even in that state, he still wanted to fight. She asked if, even in those conditions, he was still going to fight. Of course he was. And he asked if she just wanted to sit and die. He unsheathed his sword and said that, even if he died, he would take at least one of them with him. When he said those words, his sword was already fully drawn and in front of the commander. She thought he still hadn't given up, even in that situation. She was sure he was a great man, and that was why they had managed to get that far. She looked at him, standing, facing the giants in the sky, and thought it was him. She gathered her last strength, stood up, put her hand on his shoulder, and called him Corporal. Ronan said he was busy, for her to stop talking. But the one who stopped was him, as he was surprised by a kiss from her. She had put something in his mouth, and he wanted to know what it was. The commander whispered only to him, in his ear. He didn't seem to understand, and wanted to know what she was saying. Realizing she was staggering toward the end, he asked what she wanted in that situation, saying those things. She looked at him again, and called him Corporal. Ronan told her that, if they met again, he wanted her to tell him not to do anything stupid and to become a tailor. He said he had done many things, but nothing compared to that. He just looked into her eyes, from above, watching them. One of the giants was already preparing an attack. He was still facing her when the flash of the attack was already close to them. When the blow landed, they were no longer there. They had already been sent to another time. There was a child on the ground, calling for the great commander. Little by little, he was getting a sense of the landscape and the place where he was. He thought it was impossible to be in that place. He recognized it was his homeland, Nimbutem, and that he had truly gone back to the past. It was the first day of regression. He was under a tree, thinking the words the great commander said were true. He remembered the kiss she gave him, and that with it, she had put something in his mouth. She said that it was a time return pill. She said that was how she went from a tailor to becoming the great commander. She said she could go back a total of 4 times, and had already used 3, so only one chance was left. She said she was leaving it with him, that he could kill the giant. She believed he would find a way to stop the world's destruction. She said he needed to improve his skills and was happy that he wanted that too. If he wanted to learn, he should go to Philon Academy. There, she was sure they could help. He remembered what she said, that they would meet again, and asked him not to do anything stupid and to stay a tailor. She had done many things, but nothing like that. Now, he was running around the tree madly, thinking it could be a dream. Even if it was a dream, if he had returned, what could he do alone? He picked up a stick from the ground, looked at the tree, and said he could. He ran off with that stick because he wanted to see his older sister. With that stick, he was running through the city. He thought that if he had really returned, and if he went just a bit farther, he would find her. But at that moment he heard a commotion and looked to see what it was. The bullies were hanging a boy. Looking at that scene, he thought, why were they hanging that child upside down? To think that those guys hadn't changed at all. He looked closely and noticed the person wasn't tied up with a rope, but by magic. He thought someone valuable like that was hard to find on the battlefield. There couldn't be one of those in a rural town. He was sure that they would be there too. The boy didn't know how long they would keep doing that. At that bad moment, something could happen to that child. The boy hanging upside down in the water was yelling at them to let him go. He said he had no money. He said his mother's medicine that month was expensive. The guy hanging him said he didn't care at all about his mother. Since he had little money, the guy didn't like it and slapped him in the face. The bully turned around and noticed she was finishing her magic. He kept yelling at that boy in the tree, saying that since he didn't know his place, he would take him to the top of the tree. He said he couldn't go any higher, because if he made a mistake, it would be bad for him. The man made a very bad face at him, told him to shut up and lift him up before he finished him. He felt sad because he didn't know how he had ended up in that situation. He thought it was wrong to be restrained by magic. He just wanted to show he was good at something. He needed to say he couldn't do it, but he was so scared. But still, he needed to say it. He got their attention by saying please and asked them to stop. At that moment, Ronan arrived and used that stick to strike his head. With that, the boy's feet were released from the magic and he fell to the ground. The bully asked what was going on now. He charged at the boy, asking if he was going to stop just because that meddler asked him to. Ronan told him to stop worrying about trash like that, told him to talk to him instead. Looking at the boy, who was very scared, the prota said he needed to talk about something very serious. He asked where he had learned telekinesis, and he said he learned it from a grimoire he bought from a street vendor. Ronan was wondering how he was that good just with a cheap grimoire. He thought it was amazing, and was going to find out more when he saw if he was better. Then, he heard a familiar sound. He remembered it was a sword, and the bully asked him how he dared to ignore him. The boy, charging at Ronan, said he would correct his lies. All he could pay attention to was that the sword was very good, and he wanted to know where he had gotten it. He dodged the attack the boy made, and was wondering how he had managed to dodge it. Ronan realized that even though his body was younger, he still hadn't changed. His instincts were those of a disciplined soldier. His battle senses didn't seem to have changed. He then asked if the boy was feeling lucky, because he was going to make sure he never stood up again. He said that, since it had come to that point, all he had to do was get on his knees and beg. As he stood still and said nothing, the bully started provoking him, saying that if he killed him, he'd take good care of his sister. He managed to get attention when he mentioned the sister. At that moment, the boy went blind with rage and taught him a lesson. That's when the bully lost his ear. He dropped his sword on the ground, put both hands on his ear, and kept screaming that his ear was hurting. Ronan didn't like jokes and bad taste about his sister. He asked the bully if he wanted another lesson. The boy who had been subduing the other in the tree was now on his knees in front of Ronan. The other boys in the group couldn't believe Ronan had cut his ear using only a stick. Ronan looked at the group and asked if they were enjoying the show. He told them to get out of there and take that boy on the ground with them too. He ordered them to leave the money they had stolen, as well as a little extra for spoiling his mood. The boys said they would return it. He handed the money to the boy who had been hanging from the tree before. He asked if Ronan was sure he would give him all that money. Ronan said the only thing that mattered to him was the sword. The boy was very grateful. Ronan said he just needed to go back home. Yahello was ashamed of what he had done. Then he told the two of them he was really sorry. He knew he shouldn't have done that, but he was so scared he couldn't do anything about it. He said it was all his fault, and he truly was sorry. The boy said that Essel was crying the same way as when Hans brought him there the first time. He said that when he saw, he started thinking about how Essel might be in the same situation as he was. He put a hand on Essel's shoulder and told him not to worry. Smiling, he said it wasn't his fault, but he appreciated the apology. Now with the money and his things in hand, the boy was saying goodbye. Ronan and Essel were watching him leave. Ronan looked at Essel and realized he wasn't that bad. He asked if he remembered earlier when he said he had something to take care of. He told Essel that they would meet again in 4 days. He said he had a few things to handle and that they'd meet again when the light was visible in the sky. He asked Essel if he knew what would happen if he didn't show up. Then he ran off from there. Essel thought he was acting stranger than usual. Ronan was standing in front of a small house in the middle of the forest. He was at the door with flowers, and remembered he liked flowers. So he gathered all he saw, ran, and thought he was going to throw them away. But it was too late, because the door had already opened. The person said she was wondering who would be outside. He was facing away, but asked if it was Ronan. She quickly turned to see him while asking if he had come back. She was happy at the door, because he had arrived early that day. Then he said he had come back. The girl, very emotional, said she thought she wouldn't live to receive flowers from her brother. She was very happy, and he was glad she had appreciated the flowers. She said her little brother was cute, and asked if he wanted more soup. He said it was already made. The brother asked how old he would be that year. He said 22, and asked why. He was thinking that, if he was 22, then there were 10 years left until those winged giant beings would invade again. His sister placed her hand on Ronan's forehead and said she thought he had a fever. He remembered her that way, amazing and kind. She made him want that moment to last forever. But in 10 years, he would have to protect the world, and his sister. He told her he had something to say. He was thinking of entering the academy. That took her by surprise, then made her very emotional and happy. She wanted to ask if she hadn't heard wrong, if he really wanted to go to the academy. She ran off and said there was no time for this, starting to pack some things. She knew this day would come. He was smart, so she was sure he would do well. Then she pulled out a large cauldron, and with some effort, placed it there. She told him it was a gift from her to him. When he looked inside, that huge cauldron had money. He asked how much was in there. She had saved it because of him, but feared he might change his mind about the academy, and wanted to be able to pay everything soon. He said he appreciated the gift, but wanted her to use it. He told her he wanted to go to the Imperial School, the Philian Academy. She thought it was surprising. First, he didn't want to go to the academy. Now he wanted to go to the best academy there was. The Imperial School, Philion Academy, looked like one of those ancient castles. It had the best professors on the continent. He knew the people from that academy had been very useful during the war. Because the academy had such high entry standards, massive fees, and was famous, it was a problem too. He didn't know that would be her reaction. His sister became even happier. All he had to do was show good results to her. Ronan was at the agreed place, waiting for Essel. He said he only came because Ronan wouldn't leave him alone if he didn't. Ronan said it was going to be a long night, because there was something he wanted to test with him. Essel asked what he was talking about, and he replied that it was nothing much. He asked him to use telekinesis on him. He wanted to be lifted as high as he could manage. He thought it was strange to use telekinesis like that out of nowhere. Then he asked why he thought he would do something so dangerous. He said he wasn't going to die, so not to be scared. He warned that he would begin. He launched his powers on him to start levitating him. When he started to rise and leave the ground, he was already pretty high. He thought it was better than he expected, even without much height or stability. The feeling was similar. It was that which, during the battle with Ruth, allowed him to fight on equal terms. It was telekinesis. Telekinesis was a rare ability, even among mages, who were already rare around there. Ronan knew Yahello would become the most important thing in the battle to come. Yahello was having a hard time keeping it up. He asked if he could come down now, but Ronan wanted to stay a bit longer. He said he would come down on his own. Yahello wanted to know what he meant by that. Ronan held the sword tightly and seemed to be cutting something in the wind, and that's how he came down from there on his own, cutting the mana. When asked what he had just done, he said it was nothing, just an acrobatic move he had learned. He said to forget it, because he didn't know what was happening either. One of the things he thought he needed to do was figure out what that ability was. Yes, before finding out why only his sword worked against the giants. That could be the reason. He could think about that slowly. There was something he preferred to do. At last, Yahello had passed the test. That could be the first page of the biography of Ronan, the greatest storybook of the Empire. Yahello and Ronan were going down a path in the forest. He asked Ronan if he had heard correctly, if he really wanted them to go to Philion Academy. Ronan told him he had understood correctly, that he didn't know why he kept asking. He asked what Al was seeing. Al didn't want to go. Al said he understood why Ronan wanted to go. He had talent in martial arts. But Al didn't know how to do anything. And he also said he was cowardly and shy. Ronan asked if he wanted to keep living like that. He said he was wasting his innate talent with those bastards. Ronan thought he had some really dumb points. He was shy and cowardly. He was a crybaby who cried over anything. A loser who was afraid of everything. Ronan also said it was okay, because he could change starting now. Seriously, he said that whatever was done from now on couldn't be changed. And one day he would regret it, just like Ronan regretted one day. He put his hand on his shoulder and asked what he thought, and if he had changed his mind. Il could barely believe Ronan was worried about someone like him. Ronan said he wouldn't force him into anything, since it was his life, so he could go back, if he wanted. He turned his back and said he was busy. Al told him to wait, that he wanted to change too. Ronan was satisfied when he saw he would go to the academy, and that it was to teach what he needed to learn. He said it was the first time he acted maturely, and that he was the first obstacle of the new Al. Everything was going according to Ronan's plan. Al had wide eyes, staring at a campfire. They were watching from behind a bush, when Al timidly asked if that was his obstacle. Ronan warned that that was the best opponent he had found to bring out his ability. It was a Luna Goblin, and that was the leader. He was very pleased and asked Il if he was enjoying it. Ronan, looking at him, asked if they should start now. That was a Luna Goblin, a type of goblin that usually appeared in that area. Most people could tell common goblins apart by their yellow coloring and deformed bodies. Actually, the only trait of Luna Goblins was that they were fascinated by treasures. They liked to ambush merchants and steal their treasures. They gathered everything they stole in one area and held a moon festival there, on a full moon night like tonight. Al understood why they were there on that day. Ronan said he would steal all their treasure today. He had heard of something like this, about goblins who stored their treasures in one area and held festivals. Al asked how Ronan knew that, and he replied that he had his own methods. He suddenly pulled Al close and said he could use telekinesis to move all their treasure into that bag. He said it was simple, but Al didn't seem to think it was that simple. If he made a mistake, they would wake up. Ronan said they would get very angry. Al thought the plan was too risky and said they should reconsider. Ronan explained to him that to get into the academy, they needed two things. The first was money, and the second was real experience. Money was a problem, but real experience was more important. Philion was full of aristocrats who had received elite training since birth. If he wanted to beat them, there was only one thing for Al to do: gain experience by risking his life. Ronan said those guys were the perfect enemies. They wanted to gain both money and experience. He asked if Al had a better idea. Since he didn't, they would start right then. He began using telekinesis to move the goblins' treasure into their backpacks. There were many silver coins, gold, and jewels. The backpack was almost full. Ronan said it was just a little more. When the backpack was finally full, he said it was good now. He watched that treasure falling into the backpacks and was very satisfied. When he realized the last backpack was full, he said that was the last one. Ronan said the experience was the best part. He put his hand on his head, thinking he wasn't that confident, but he would get used to it so fast. Al was better than he imagined. His eyes were shining because he had found a servant. He said the bags were already full, so they better go. Ronan said there was nothing left to do there, and that they were already leaving before something went wrong. In the dark forest, there was a bird flying at full speed, and two boys running after it. They were shouting and making a lot of noise. In that chase that passed by, Ronan and Al heard all that commotion. Ronan wanted to know what kind of lunatics caused so much chaos at that hour. All that noise ended up waking the goblins. They arrived late to the mess and quickly looked at the treasure box. They realized it had been stolen and started yelling that the treasure disappeared and that there was a thief there. In a few moments, they were all awake and looking for where the thief was. Al and Ronan tried to leave without being noticed, but they were spotted. They already knew that wouldn't be good. They already knew the goblins. Il was terrified. Now they would have to deal with what seemed too good to be true. Il asked him what they should do. If they gave up, they would leave the treasure and run away. He asked Il how he would pay for classes without that, and how he would make money any other way. All the goblins found out where the two were, looking at the sword to see what they could do with it. They realized the longsword was made of cheap steel. They also knew it wouldn't last more than 15 hits. And there were about 15 goblins. They were already impatient, trying to attack. AL was worried about the situation. However, Ronan was focused. He grabbed his sword and remembered he had 15 attacks. He thought it was enough and started cutting. AL was sitting, just watching the heads fly. Ronan had done a lot of damage with just one blow, and he still had 14 more strikes. Those birds, who were responsible for waking the owners, were still around with the sword stuck in the skull of one of them. Ronan said that was the last one, and it wasn't that bad. AL was still sitting in the same place. He thought everything he had just seen was impossible. He had taken out 3 goblins with one strike, and the other goblins who came after, he noticed that Ronan disappeared for a second and reappeared instantly. The goblins didn't have much chance. AL was thinking about the obstacle he faced against the goblins. Ronan asked him if he would keep daydreaming, told him to ask if things would go home. He was finding it very tiring to think he could travel comfortably, but nothing went as planned. He thought his muscles hurt just from cutting goblins. He thought that, when he returned, he would need physical training. AL asked what those screams were earlier. He didn't know what it was either. Then Ronan remembered that those screams caused all that mess. He said they would make them pay, because they had put his life at risk. Someone threw an arrow that was heading toward IL. When he turned and saw that the arrow was coming his way, he was very scared. Ronan caught the arrow before it touched him. AL was even more terrified when he saw Ronan holding the arrow that would definitely have hit him. He even thought the forest was cursed, because there were so many lunatics there. The 2 who were chasing a bird and made a mess were now right in front of them. Ronan didn't like it when they said they were just kids. They were apologizing for having caused trouble. One of them said he heard a noise and thought it was a monster. And he was saying those things while looking at the backpack and the treasure that was visible. One said to the other that they almost killed people. Ronan asked them to stop, as they couldn't even hide their glances, told them to stop acting and answer properly. He asked again who they were. For a moment, both of them were silent. Then they said they would introduce themselves properly. They already had a hand on a sword, going straight at Ronan, and they said he was Callie. Boro grabbed the hand that was on the sword, and with the other hand, punched him in the face. The boy who took the hit seemed to feel empathy. He seemed to know them and didn't like them. The second guy, who was in the forest watching his friend fall, ran up to them. AL was worried when he saw that the guy running wasn't armed. He used telekinesis on the other, and managed to hold him so he wouldn't hurt Ronan. He recognized that move as the invisible hand, and the opponent couldn't move. Before dealing with the other guy, Ronan looked at the sky with joy. Now he was going to be part of it. He took his weapon, passed by him, and struck him several times. The guy was falling, but everything was so fast, he didn't seem to know what was happening. Ronan just watched him fall to the ground. IL, even though he had been brave in helping, was still scared. He asked Ronan if the guy had died. Ronan said yes, and that he wouldn't let someone like that live. He asked if he hadn't heard when they said they were Callie Boro. They were involved in illegal hunting, kidnapping, and human trafficking. A group that did all kinds of crime and was the most malicious in the Empire. While he was dealing with the other one, he then told AL that if he hadn't stopped them, they would have surely sold AL's organs. He said that knowing who they were and letting them live would be a crime. Told AL to stop making a fuss and grab the stuff. That was when he noticed a strange sack that was moving. AL wanted to know if it was an animal. However, they were still opening that sack. As he said, they'd find out as soon as it was opened. As soon as it opened, a bird quickly came out of there. Ronan wanted to know what that blue chicken was. That bird was flying near them, and Ronan wanted to know why it was blue. AL said it was the first time he saw a blue bird. He also said it was the first time he saw it. Ronan noticed shackles on that bird. He knew those shackles were Callie Boro's traps. They disrupted the prisoner's mana and restricted movement. He thought those were only used in rare cases, or when capturing fantastic creatures. The bird looked at him as if it wanted him to respond to something. When Ronan finally figured out what the bird was, the bird connected to him. AL freaked out when he realized it had just spoken. Ronan explained that it was communication magic. Realizing it spoke as soon as it got out of the sack, he understood maybe there was a way to block mana. Ronan spoke through the bird and asked if he was the owner of the blue bird. He said he was Varen and was researching rare beasts at the institution. Varen apologized for being rude and asked who he was talking to. Ronan said they were just travelers. He reported that they had just fought some thieves who had kidnapped that bird. Ronan mentioned that they saved the bird. The bird's owner was worried that the thieves had been kidnapped. He said that crossed his mind, but who could imagine it would really happen? Said he wasn't sure how to repay the favor. Yahello said it wasn't necessary. Just tell them how to return the bird to him. Ronan said it was exhausted, and that if they removed that thing, maybe it could fly. The owner said it probably could. Varen said the dream bird had a good sense of direction. He took his sword and, with one strike, broke those shackles holding the bird. He spoke to the bird to return to its father, calling it Little Blue. Told the bird to stop making its father worry. The bird seemed to be saying something, but Ronan wasn't understanding. It was wagging its tail at him. He didn't know what that meant. The bird's owner said it was asking to pull a feather. Varen explained that when they removed a feather from a dream bird, it worked as a compass to the main body. He asked if he had ever removed one. He said, "If you ever come to the institution, please visit me and Marpin." As the bird was flying away, he shouted that he would definitely repay the debt. The two of them spent a moment looking at that feather. Then they returned to the sack and kept looking. A few days later, in a town, they had gone to sell those two and turn it into money. A merchant was watching and thought the items were incredible. He offered 20 gold coins for each of them. The merchant said all the items he brought had great value. Ronan was satisfied. He finally found someone who understood. All the other merchants were scammers. He didn't think he would find such a sensible merchant just walking around. The merchant said he was honored to hear that. He told the merchant there was something else he wanted to check besides that, and pulled something from his pocket, showed it to the merchant. However, he said he wouldn't sell it, but was curious about what it could be. He was remembering that on the night he got the blue duck, or bird, it had left that behind. When he saw that in his hand, at first he thought the bird might have defecated. He thought that chicken had repaid his kindness by doing such a thing. He thought it was disgusting and threw it against the rock. The rock broke, and the egg remained intact. He realized it could be a great item. The merchant thought he wasn't sure if it was a bird's egg, but it was a product of a fantastic creature. The merchant kept checking the color and texture. Since Ronan was in a great mood, he decided to joke a little. He asked the man if it was horse feces. The merchant said it wasn't and didn't know what it was. He thought it was an unusual object. He advised him to look for a specific place for evaluation. He put it back in his pocket and said he couldn't sell it because he was curious to know what it was. Ronan asked him if, by chance, he sold books about Philon. He explained that they were planning to take the academy entrance exam, but knew very little. The merchant said his daughter was also going to take the entrance exam. He was sure he could help him. She arrived and asked her father who they were. The merchant told Ronan that this was his only daughter, Maria. When he saw the name, he thought he knew it. When he looked and saw it was a girl, he was surprised. The father said they were important people who had just closed a deal with him. She called them kids, and the father asked her to mind her manners when speaking. The merchant apologized to him for his daughter being like that, with such a sharp tongue. Yahello was talking to the merchant when he noticed Ronan had stepped away. He went to the girl and asked if her name was really Maria, asked if she used the surname Sen. She answered yes, and wanted to know how he had that information. He found it strange, because she really looked like someone he knew. He called her closer to ask another question. Ronan wanted to know if she was really a girl or if she was a boy. She looked at him in disbelief. She couldn't believe he was asking such a question. She became thoughtful. She didn't know why he was asking her that. Then she said that no matter how much she looked, she couldn't understand what he meant. Then he looked at that merchant and thought that old man must have another child he didn't know about. The girl told him to shut up, called him crazy, and slapped him. When he got that slap, he found the feeling familiar. He knew it was him, his friend from a past life, Count Maria Senner. Ronan remembered that, back when he was a soldier in a place called Har Marlin, Maria was in charge of supplies, had great ethics, and was an easy personality to deal with. He made friends with anyone. He didn't like some topics that men like to talk about a lot, and had a strange habit of slapping others. He always wanted to know the reason, but since Maria had died before, he was smiling for no reason, even after being slapped. He never thought he'd find the answer there. He discovered that Count Maria was a girl. She noticed he kept laughing, so she was going to hit him again. He didn't like it much and gave her a flick on the forehead. Said she was getting full of herself just because he let her hit him before. Told her he only let her hit him because he made a mistake. She asked what if she hit twice and headbutted his chin. The two started fighting, pulling each other's hair. Her father and Yahello were watching that and thought it was weird. They quickly separated the two, who were in a serious fight. Sometime later, Yahello was confused, seeing they were trying to kill each other before, and now were having a conversation. Now he was looking at some items to take. If the things he looked at weren't good, he would buy something else. Yahello saw that the two were fine. Maria told him they were 3 swords and a magic staff. She asked why he wanted 3 swords. Won't it be hard to carry them? He asked what she thought and said they weren't bad. But that black iron one was the best. She said black iron was very hard. An item many renowned knights sought. He remembered that the black iron sword was his favorite in the past. Maria was explaining that the magic staff had a great magic stone, and said it should go to Yahello. Looking at him, she asked if that cutie was the mage. She told him what kind of magic he used, and he answered, telekinesis. She was impressed. Telekinesis was amazing. If he did things right, he could even get a scholarship. She asked Ronan what technique he would show during the practical exam. She explained that, to get into the academy, one had to take a practical exam, where you must impress the teachers and show your techniques. Of course, the written exam would be very difficult, but not as hard as the practical. Ronan realized he looked like a swordsman. Just needed good fencing. Maria said they usually demonstrated their combat techniques with Huma. He asked if kids who used swords at that age could use mana, even if they weren't mages. She confirmed that basic mana use was applied to combat, but from his expression, she realized he didn't use it. She asked if he didn't know how to feel his own mana. He asked if it was similar to aura. Maria was horrified, because a guy like that couldn't even try to get into the academy. Wanted to know how he had the nerve to say aura and mana were similar things. She said he had no condition to follow her. She asked if she could get those swords that were at the blacksmith. Wanted to know why he was so confident. And what if he damaged those swords of his? Maria said it could happen, but if it did, she would pay triple. Told him to stop talking and come with her, because she'd give him special training. She explained that mana is the root of nature's power, and that, after they learn their own mana techniques, they go to the academy. She thought it didn't make sense to explain to him the difference between mana and aura. Told him that, if seen from the right angle, aura was a type of mana, but the difference between them was like heaven and earth. Those with talent are known to train for at least 10 years and barely gain any power. That was aura. She asked him if he could understand a little, and he said yes. He said he had met them on the battlefield some time ago, and started feeling full of himself because he was an aura user and they used a similar power. He said they were quite annoying, but it was unexpected to discover how amazing that was. Maria said the explanation was enough and they would start. She said she thought he would learn faster using the body instead of the head. When she prepared to attack him, he thought it was fine, since she was just a young girl. All he needed was to block her attack. He blocked and pushed back. He was shocked. She could exert so much power even being so young, and also used 2 swords. Maria couldn't see and wasn't sure, but thought that fighting style might be mana. She kept looking and thinking about what had happened to him. She also planned to finish it with 1 strike and show him the power of mana, and make him give up the exam. She thought that would be better than him being humiliated in the exam area, but she was being pressured. That was the skill of someone who couldn't use mana. He asked her what she was thinking about. He noticed she focused, and, suddenly, the fight got easier. He started attacking for real, and told her to dodge instead of blocking. She got a bit scared. But he wasn't going to change the attack. She really had to dodge. Ronan was attacking for real. That person. Something bad could have happened to her if she hesitated. She told Ronan he wasn't normal. He said the same went for her. She told him that, putting mana aside, his sword talent was great, but his swing was a bit rusty. But if he fixed that, he would improve a lot. Realizing he was leaving, she asked where he was going. She got furious. Asked him if he thought he had won because of that. He said whatever. It was to keep the promise. Showed the sword that was damaged, and said he promised to pay 3 times more. Then asked to prepare the swords. Yahello was calling her attention. He wanted to say something. He said she did a good job, because he could understand what she was going through. Ronan said he was going to walk fast because he was tired. Maria stayed still on the battlefield wondering who those 2 were. He said he had only gone to the merchant market to get the money she owed. He came across several things close to the money and asked if it was a book. She said yes. It was a theory book for the Academy's written exam. She made it herself, asked if he wasn't going to need them. But there was only a month until the exam. He said he did need it, but why go that far? He asked if she planned to mess him up. Said it wasn't like that she had already started to like them. Maria said it was something she was giving him because she wanted him to pass. Told him to study hard, and if they slacked off later, none of that would go unpunished. Asked if he understood, and Ronan said the same went for her. Leaving in her father's carriage, she said she would see them in the capital on the day of the exam, and told the two to make sure to read all hers. Since he thought he had to train his weak body and study things he wasn't very good at, he felt it wasn't a bad feeling. That was Ronan's life after returning home. Now with his sister and Yahello, he ate until his stomach almost exploded after each meal. He began to increase his stamina and adapt his adaptability. Found a place where he would train that day. He would do that until there were no more monsters around the village. He also studied something. He imagined, for a soldier like him, even without knowing how everything would end, he gave his best. After a month, the day finally came. Vayon, the central city. Yahello was impressed, because he thought the academy was very big and beautiful. He was fascinated. Ronan asked him what he was doing in the middle of the street, told him to stop being daydream head and get in, because they were late for the exam. Yahello stood still, staring at Ronan. He asked what it was. He said he was a bit surprised, since it had only been a month. He had already grown bigger, and asked if he was going to start with that again. Giving him some head slaps, he told him to stop saying nonsense and hurry up. He thought that now that he was already at the academy, he might find someone. He wanted to find the sword saint, Cleophon, descendant of Granchia, a prestigious swordsman family. He thought he would find him at the exam. Not that it mattered much. Yahello asked Ronan if he had that thing. He wanted to know what he meant by that, the bird feather that was supposed to lead him to the owner. He had put it in the backpack before they left, because he remembered the old man mentioned living in the capital. He planned to visit him only after the test. The feather pointed to the highest floor. The bird's owner was in his room. He thought it was difficult to get used to being a teacher, and was thinking about going back to just research. The bird marp was trying to cheer him up. The zoology professor of Philion, Varen Goner, was the beastman type. He was talking to his bird about opening the window to get some air, in case his hero visited. He didn't think it could be problematic. He hadn't even knocked yet, but had already opened it. While Ronan noticed it was the little blue one from before, and asked them who the owner was, the two were having a panic attack. The professor got scared, asked who he was, and how he got there. Yahello was tired. That was one of the highest floors. Ronan told him he got scared, thinking he was going to fall. Varen got angry, thinking they had gone after his bird, but calmed down when he saw Marpace's feather in Ronan's hand. He spent some time connecting things, but understood they were the heroes. The professor apologized, and Ronan said it was okay. He didn't need to apologize. He said that if he wanted to blame someone, he could blame Yahello. He was the one who climbed the stairs. Ronan covered his mouth and asked him to stay quiet. Ronan said the most important thing was unexpected for a lion, which was a rare type of beastman, to be the owner of that bird. Varen was also surprised, as he thought the heroes were just applicants. It was a shame. If he had known this before, he would have prepared a recommendation. But now it was too late. The exam was already that day. He said he needed to ask something and didn't have much time. He showed that stone and asked what it was, since the little blue one had left it behind. The professor said that was a dream bird egg. Marpesa gave birth and knew what surprising thing was in Paz. He laid an egg. He said it wasn't just an egg, it was a dream bird egg, but he had no idea what would come out of that egg. He said that if it was a dream egg, another dream bird would come out. The professor explained that the dream comp was different. Everything depends on the environment where it hatches and the mana. He said that if he analyzed the mana coming from the egg, it wouldn't be impossible to predict what would appear. But that egg possessed an infinity of manas. It looked like molten metal, as if it had been changed. But he couldn't say for sure what would come out or not. He thought he was putting too much meaning into just one egg. The professor asked the bird where he had gone to lay an egg like that. He commented that he had never seen such a naughty bird. The professor wanted to make a request to Ronan. He asked if he minded taking care of the egg. He said he didn't mind. Ronan asked the professor if it was okay, and if the egg wasn't precious. The professor said of course it was, since birds only lay one in their lifetime. The professor said that the fact that Marp had laid an egg in front of his heroes made him think the bird had felt something special. He was going to respect a friend he had spent a lot of time with. Ronan said that was fine. He was very curious to know what was inside. Ronan was already saying goodbye, as it was almost time. In 2 years, they would have to go. However, the professor asked him to wait a bit. He said he had been thinking about how to reward him and thought of something very good. Then he gave him something that would help hatch the egg. Sometime later, in the practical test hall, in the martial artists' waiting area, it was announced that Candidate 111's exam was over. Candidate 102 was called and was going to start the test. Ronan would be next. He thought they were making him wait too long. He asked what Maria thought. She said it was like that in all tests. He asked why she was dressed like that. Wasn't it uncomfortable? She said to be careful with that, since the academy was private for nobles. She said they could become precious clients later, so she needed to make a good impression. She was missing AL, but the mage test was in another place. It was announced that exam 112 was over, and for candidate 113 to enter, please. That was his turn. Maria advised him not to be nervous, to do as she had said. She said that if he failed, she wouldn't let it slide. He was quite confident and said he'd be right back. He was facing some people. He thought they could be the academy professors. Looking, they all seemed very incredible. But among them, there was an old man in the middle. It was the director and archmage Krava Crater. He also noticed there was a woman there. It was surprising. He rarely felt this vigor in his past life. He greeted and said his name to everyone. Who greeted him back was Director Dis. Dis told him he would face a magic puppet and could demonstrate his technique. He didn't think it was anything special, just a quick cut. He thought it was enough for a puppet. That caught him by surprise. It was a simple cut, without mana. 2 professors were commenting that the boy was judging the puppets just by appearance. The puppet was an extremely precious magical engineering product. The genius Schlein could barely make a cut, and was wondering what that boy was planning to demonstrate. The director wasn't comfortable, as he realized the professors were offending the candidate who was right there. He thought that if that child proved them wrong, things would get out of control. He just went and disconnected the puppet's head, which left the fencing professor Grand Saint of the Sword at Boris quite impressed. Putting away his sword, he asked if that was all. One of the teachers couldn't believe he thought the hardest cut was just some random thing. He asked the director what he thought about the grade, but the director was gaping at the fencing teacher's reaction. She leapt over the table and ran toward the boy, placing her sword at Ronan's neck. He just looked at her and commented that she scared him. And he asked why she wanted to know who he was and who had taught him that swordsmanship. Ronan was very confused by the teacher's questions. She changed the question and asked if he could see her movements. He replied that yes, he could, and he found them amazing. She said that, at that moment, it should be hard for him to even draw his sword. But even so, he managed to swing it 3 times. And he said it was 3, just as he had shown the teachers. She asked if he thought that arrogant cut wouldn't be recognized. He thought she wouldn't recognize his swordsmanship, so he deliberately slowed down the last cut, just in case the teachers couldn't see it, as if he was underestimating all of them. He admitted he had forgotten where he was. The director and 2 theoretical teachers were staring at him, but that wasn't all that happened. He had only adjusted his strength because he thought the sword wouldn't withstand the last cut. But judging by her mood, she wouldn't believe him. After removing her blade from the student's neck, that teacher said she would remember him. She looked at him with a devilish glare and said she would personally make sure to teach him. The director watched and knew what she meant when she said she would teach him personally. He knew she wanted that student as her disciple. He thought he needed to pay more attention. The director told Ronan that he had done a good job. He would finish his test with a simple question, one that didn't have a definitive answer. He could say whatever he wanted. He asked what he had come to the academy to learn. Ronan knew there was only one possible answer. He had come to learn to have no regrets. That answer caught the director off guard, but he understood. The director was worried about how they could teach him to have no regrets. One of the teachers thought that boy was nothing special, but he had already won over the instructor and the director. Looking at the test dummy with a visible cut, he thought the best way to explain it was talent. Amid the confusion, the teachers hadn't looked properly at the bench. When he looked, the teacher was shocked because the dummy's head was no longer there. Thinking about that woman with the sword, he doubted even his past self could beat her. He thought he had already faced enough difficulties. But after meeting her, he realized he still had a long way to go. Now he was convinced the commander had done well in sending him to the academy, and he thought he could learn many things. All that was left was the written test. He had memorized a lot that month, so he thought it would be easy. After taking the written test, he realized it wasn't as easy as he thought. He thought it was hard for him, but his whole life had been like that. Maria was angry and talking to Yahello because he had only answered half the test. He took the things he needed to study, reviewed them, and then completely forgot. Yahello thought it was his fault for not remembering to remind him. Maria told him not to worry, since the practical test carried more weight. And with his skills, she was sure he had done well. The students erupted in chaos because the results were finally out. A huge panel appeared magically, displaying the names of the qualifiers. Yahello asked if that was the list of people who had passed. Yahello's result: he had placed 12th in the magic practical test and 1st in the theoretical one. Maria had placed 9th in the practical and 9th in the theoretical. She looked up at the sky, and the two jumped for joy because they had passed. Maria praised him for placing 1st in the theoretical test. He and 2 others had ranked among the best. Maria was very happy for him. She asked Ronan what his ranking was. The protagonist seemed a little downcast and said he knew he wouldn't be there. He thought someone like him couldn't go to the academy. She got mad and asked if he was joking. She told him to look properly and widened her eyes. A light appeared in the sky, descending and forming a small explosion. Maria explained that it was the final result of the entrance exams for the chosen ones of each department. What was announcing it was a glorious phoenix that seemed to fly toward Ronan. It exploded into a message in the air, writing that Ronan had placed 1st in the tactical test for the martial arts department and nearly last in the theoretical one. The 3 were a little shocked by that. But then the other 2 started hugging and squeezing Ronan. For someone who had nearly placed last in the theoretical test, he was the martial arts department's chosen one. Maria was delighted because she knew he was a genius. She thought that if he had placed 1st, then that person must have lost to him. With her personality, she wouldn't stay quiet. Someone was watching him and thought he was strange. Then, a guy approached him and asked if he was the one who had placed 1st in the practical test, and that was how he met the sword saint, Schliff. This time, he was now face to face with the fencing saint. The people around murmured that they hadn't expected to see the Empire's rising star there. Maria told Ronan that the guy seemed to want to talk to him, and thought it would be annoying if he kept it up. Even before, he couldn't imagine anyone having better swordsmanship than his. It was an overwhelming spirit. Ronan would do his best to avoid that situation. So he said he had no idea what was going on, which didn't seem to please the guy talking to him very much. He asked why he was lying. Ronan asked what he meant, if he had any proof. If he didn't stop picking fights and kept attacking him, things would get bad. The guy said that if he wanted proof, then he would show him. He drew his sword and charged. Maria and Yahello grew worried. He asked if that was enough, because if he hadn't placed 1st, he wouldn't have been able to react to that. The people around got excited, thinking this would be a fight. He asked Ronan to show him the skills that had defeated him. Ronan didn't want to avoid it, but if that was what he wanted, then he would show him. He sent power straight at him, which the guy managed to block. Ronan asked if it was enough, if he was satisfied. He replied that his score made sense now. He decided something. He had good technique. He said that, as expected, it wasn't enough to defeat him. He wanted to avoid the clash at all costs. But the fencing saint wanted to see what he was hiding. The fencing saint still wasn't satisfied. He couldn't accept that. Ronan realized he was trying to kill him. That was why he didn't want to face him. He knew that if this continued, he would start using aura, and that would be bad. A storm created by a single slash. An overwhelming aura called Tempestuous Sword. He knew he couldn't handle it. He turned his back and ran. His opponent said he couldn't turn his back during a fight. He was about to put his sword to Yahello's neck. The opponent was still chasing him, but when he saw what he had done, he stopped right away. Yahello, frightened, asked Ronan what he was doing. The fencing saint didn't like at all that he was doing that. He called him a coward for using a girl as a shield. Yahello shouted that he was a man, but it was just as Ronan thought. He hadn't changed at all. Even when he was about to die, He knew he would keep protecting chivalry, and Ronan took advantage of that by punching him in the face. He grabbed Maria and Yahello and ran from there. The people around had already called the guards to stop the commotion. When they arrived, they saw Mr. Schliff, who asked what was happening and who had dared to do that to him. He asked them to speak to him informally. Here, he wasn't the son of the C family, just a common applicant with no status. After that, they didn't need to worry, because it was just a fair fight that he would handle himself. Looking at his sword, he noticed it had cracked. That one was made of high-grade ore. He was thinking Ronan's skills weren't anything special. He didn't think he could do that much with a sword like that. He said he would remember that name. The next day, outside the capital, in the forest, the two were walking and looking at the map. Ronan swore it was around there. Yahello asked if they really could have done that. He was talking about the fight from the other day. He heard that guy was the heir of a cow family. Ronan told him not to worry because that was a good person, just crazy when it came to swords. He was a model for his position and someone who protected the weak. He said he should have told them that what happened was just a fair duel, because if it weren't, they would have already arrested them. Yahello agreed and said that, if he thought about it, it made sense. Ronan thought he had found the source of mana that circulated around the world for unknown reasons. He knew the value of that was astronomical, and most people would want to monopolize it. But that professor was generous enough to give them something like that for cracking an egg. He asked if Yahello was feeling something different. He said it was his first time seeing so much mana concentrated in one place. He said he could use magic freely there. Maria said his new pocket was reacting like before. She said it was absorbing mana at an incredible speed. It seemed to like the mana there. Ronan said he understood, and thought that if Maria were there too, she would have liked it. Yahello stayed quiet for a moment, looking at that mana source. Then, he asked Ronan if he thought it seemed strange, because the professor had said there was a lot of mana there, and that many mystical species lived and nested there. That meant even common animals found it really good. He finished by asking why they weren't hearing any animal noises. Only then did Ronan realize he had been complacent with things, and they were about to get complicated again, because that happened everywhere he went. He told Yahello to be ready, because he was smelling a lot of blood. Yahello felt a little uncomfortable when he heard Ronan say he smelled strong blood. He also said some had already been there before. Of course, as visitors, he meant invaders, and those people started shooting arrows at them. Ronan quickly drew his sword to defend against those arrows. Looking at the arrows, he was sure they were the same ones from the squad's camp. He remembered someone bragging about how good those arrows were. They could blow off most orcs' heads. After spending a good time showing off with those arrows, he asked the captain if he would also like some. For someone who was caught hunting with that, how would he dare to speak of something? But the boy kept talking about how the person who used that more than 100 times was successful in hunting. He was an elite member of his organization, Caliboro's hunting dog. He remembered thinking, it was him again calling himself by the name Hunting Dog. He asked Yahello to hide and be careful not to become an easy target. Then he shot off saying he was going to do a little something there. They realized that person was coming. They saw that he would accept all that damage with one cut, because all the arrows had mana. They zigzagged through the trees until they reached them. The leader asked them to disperse and hit him. Ronan was thinking that the decision-making was quite fast. It could be that they were different from what he found in the forest. He also realized that this wouldn't be good, so he shouted for them to stop the attacks and asked if they didn't know their own allies. He asked if they had never heard of him. He was the new hunting dog of the Damas Ayu lineage. Everyone was around him asking if he was really a hunting dog. They didn't believe that a child like him could be a hunting dog. Ronan said that if they didn't believe it, they could ask the wolf of the lineage, and he would give a small warning. Assuming that others can't do what you can't do is a terrible habit, and he called them dogs. He said there was nothing more pathetic than that. Grabbing the leader's shirt, he said that child was humiliating him, and asked if he wanted him to cut his arms off. Another member asked him to calm down. He shouldn't doubt him just for being a child. He said he had a notion of how it worked, and he spoke with authority about Caliboro's system, which only they knew. He said he would confirm with the captain, because if he wasn't lying, they could get in trouble with the Damas lineage later. Someone was coming, and said he had already warned them to be quiet. He asked what was happening. The one arriving was the captain, the wolf of Mattia Dem FM. One of them was explaining to the captain that that child claimed to be someone from their group. Ronan looked at that situation and thought that the fact that the wolf was there could only mean that all of them were in the same place. The captain asked the boy if he was the Hayut of the Damas lineage, and he said yes. Then he found it strange and asked what he was doing there, since that part of the mountain was theirs. He, smiling, said he didn't know, since he wasn't the Ahut. He drew his sword and started slicing. He had only used the first name and went to his head. It was the best name to use when pretending to be an illegal hunter. He advanced on the captain and sliced him. Then he told the guy who was picking a fight with him before that he had already warned him that he was going to get in trouble. Then he cut off some fingers from one hand. The guy crouched down and screamed in pain. Ronan threw a leaf at him and said that if he didn't want to die, he should get up, take that, and start writing the location of all the lineages he knew. Ronan's sword approached, and he asked what the problem was. Didn't he want to? If he didn't want to, then he didn't need to keep him alive. The boy said he would do anything he wanted, but he had nothing to draw with. Ronan said he had already made pens for him. He told him to use his right hand, from which he had already removed the fingers. Ronan looked at that leaf and said his drawings were good. He said that boy was quite talented. Then the man asked if he could spare him as he had promised. Ronan put a hand in his pocket and said, "Of course." He emphasized, and after that said, "Of course I wouldn't keep you alive." They had already walked a certain distance when Yahello felt tired. Ronan asked him to stop exaggerating, since he had already asked him to prepare himself. Yahello said that was a bit too much. The boy wanted to know if all of that there was the same work of Caliboro. Ronan had already warned that letting them live was a crime. He completed by saying not to worry, because they were wanted criminals who needed to be eliminated. They suddenly noticed something that left both of them wide-eyed. The drops of blood from the animals slaughtered there were rising and forming a larger particle, and that particle was immense, and took the shape of a great wave. Even without knowing what that was, Ronan was about to draw his sword. However, the egg began to react and came out of his pocket. It went to the center of where that giant wave was and began to absorb everything. Yahello got worried and asked what was happening. Ronan asked him not to ask. For him, one thing he knew. Whatever was inside that egg was not something ordinary. The egg absorbed every last drop of that giant wave. Yahello, worried, asked Ronan if it was over. He said it seemed so, but he didn't think it had changed much. However, the egg began to crack, levitated, and several cracks appeared on it. Yahello seemed to be worried about what would come out of there. He was happy to finally have hatched. A big hole had already formed in the egg, and he wanted to know what was there. The thing that was inside his egg came out quickly and hit his nose head-on. There wasn't even time for him to see what it was. He noticed it had wings. It could be a dream bird. Although Ronan had observed quite a bit, he couldn't distinguish if that could be a bird. Yahello said that looked like a dragon. He said it was very similar to what they had seen in the book. Remembering the shape of that beautiful blue little bird, he didn't know where it had absorbed mana from to turn into something strange like that. Petting what came out of the egg, he said that at least it was cute, but he got angry with it, because he said its welcome was a bit too much. A direct punch like that. That little one made a seal and threw it at the boy. He noticed that the wounds had disappeared. Yahello noticed that it could use healing magic. Ronan was satisfied because that little thing had more abilities than it appeared. Yahello told Ronan that they could give it a name, and they couldn't keep calling it Dreambird. While he was still thinking that no name would suit it, the small animal seemed to hear something that caught its attention. It went towards the sky and left. Yahello wanted to know where it went like that, out of nowhere. Ronan said it seemed like it had sensed some presence. There was a wanderer from the Demir branch running around there. He didn't know what was happening. He just went out for a moment to do a task, and when he came back, everyone was down. He managed to see that wave that looked more like a sea. Now he was running after something that was chasing him. The teacher, at the root of a tree, fell to the ground. Suddenly, that bird that looked more like a dragon was up high, sucking his blood. The man was desperate because the bird wouldn't stop sucking. Ronan asked it to stop, and said he wanted to avoid ending up killing him. Yahello asked if Sita would be her name. She said yes, that she already had that name in mind. Then she asked the little one what he thought. The boy fallen on the ground thought that guy was the one from before. He imagined that he was the owner of that brother. He went there, asked if he was okay, and called them blows. The boy answered yes, that he was fine, that he was alive thanks to him. Then he touched him and asked who he was. How did he know his name? Ronan put the sword to his neck. He told him that he wouldn't need to know that. The boy seemed to have remembered him from the night before. He thought he was the master hunting dog of Calaboro. Ronan told him that the classification was lower at that time, and that there was something he needed him to do, just so he knew he wasn't lost. With some gold coins in his hand, Ronan was saying he was better than he thought. Al agreed with him. Al collected some of that water that turned into gold, and got a little confused. Ronan wanted to know why Maria's father offered a high price for her, and thanks to that, they didn't need to worry about money, because they were in debt to Professor Very in various ways. They had gone there to thank him for everything and show Sita to him. But little did they know they would be on a business trip. But besides the work he had given, B. Roos also had a mission he received from that hunting dog. It was simpler than a thank you. He put so much fear in him that he was sure he wouldn't think of doing anything wrong. Al asked Ronan what he was going to do with the money. He said that ranking members were exempt from school fees. There was something he wanted to do. The entrance ceremony was almost coming. A few days later, at the carriage station in the city of Velon, someone told the young lady that they had already arrived at their destination and thanked her. She was satisfied, because that was the capital, and she found everything very incredible. Ronan asked if she shouldn't be tired from the trip. She was very satisfied to see him. He asked her if nothing else had happened while he was away. She said she should be asking that. He got a big shock when a high-class carriage stopped in front of their house. He didn't know how that was possible. Squeezing his cheeks, she wanted to know why he had lost so much weight. She asked if he was eating well. She was relieved, but noticed that he had a little animal on his shoulder. She asked what that cute little animal was. Ronan introduced it, saying that was Sita, who had started traveling with him. He said the most important thing was that they needed to hurry, because they didn't have much time. He said he had something he really needed to do. Shortly after, they were inside a very luxurious store. She knew he had earned money for entering the academy. Still, she thought that present was a bit too much. Ronan looked curiously at the attendant and asked if everything he had tried on could be delivered. His sister got very euphoric because there were many. He said there weren't that many and that they wanted to buy more. She got quite emotional and realized that her little brother had grown a lot. She went spinning around the whole store, shouting that her little brother was a very kind person. She asked him where they would go after there. He said he wanted to visit the places, and that his sword had been damaged days ago. Then he opened the door to leave. Outside, the boy asked him if they were done. To get attention, he called Ronan by name. Ronan almost died of shock, because he didn't expect to see him there. He asked why he was coming from there, and if he was a stalker. He said he just went to get the sword in the surroundings. And coincidentally, he ended up seeing him, so he decided to wait. He asked, please, to stop with that disrespectful attitude. Ronan said that was exactly what a stalker would say if he were crazy like him. He got irritated when he saw that his sword was defective. He asked who he should be blaming there. He said he really wanted to have shown something like a defect. It looked like Ronan's weapon. Ronan got angry because she had already taught him that he shouldn't be using bad words. She said that boy had started it and only made his situation worse, because she noticed he was responding to her delicately. She apologized, saying her brother had a dirty mouth, but a very good heart. She told him he should be very shocked. However, he didn't mind at all, because the vision he had of her was of a goddess. She said it was her fault for not having disciplined her brother correctly. Schliff took all responsibility for him and said it was his lack of description. He said everything that happened was under his responsibility, that she could be calm. She took his hands and said she thought Ronan would have a friend like him. It made her happy about that. She asked him to take care of her little brother from that day on. The boy, very blushed and embarrassed, said he would take care of him. He wasn't liking it much there, but there was nothing he could do. Still blushed, the boy said he would first compensate him for the sword, and that he didn't have gold with him at the moment. So he offered a coat of arms as identification and proof of his family. He said they could use it anywhere in the empire, and if the girl wanted to buy a sword, please, she should go to the blacksmith at the end of the street. It was a place known for carrying a 500-year legacy, so it was difficult for commoners to enter there. He said he hoped they would make a good sword for them. He went there then, and realized that crazy guy knew exactly what he was doing. Harold thought that with Grancia's identification proof, he could buy the entire village. He didn't think that was really the sword Saint Schliff he knew. The next day, at the Academy's entrance ceremony, The director was saying it was a pleasure to meet all those freshmen. He introduced himself, saying he was the academy's director, and that his name was Krava Cater. While the director was speaking, Maria and Yahello were together there, listening. Schliff, with his status, was further ahead, close to the teachers. The director finished saying he believed all of them would remain in the Empire's history. He congratulated everyone on their entrance and spoke to Class 787. Lunan, there in the middle, was already yawning. His sister, as a guest, just like the other people, was already in tears. As soon as he finished speaking, the director snapped his fingers and a light with various colors began to circulate there. Everyone began to observe that reality seemed to be getting distorted. The sky seemed to be breaking, and suddenly, they all appeared in the center of a large arena. Someone was saying it was a pleasure to meet them, and called them freshmen. He didn't think he had teleported the entire place with a snap of his fingers. The director said the ceremony had reached its peak, and that they would start the meeting between veterans and freshmen. It was something that occurred between the newcomers and the second years. Since it was the first meeting between them, the process was usually intense, and was also a special event at the academy. The process happened in a way that the first and second in the ranking represented the freshmen. Each one was assigned to one of the 4 second years for an individual fight. Then, a battle would occur between each one. The director warned that the importance of that event was directly linked to the academy's instructors. He believed they would improve, and that healthy competition was the beginning of true education. Ronan's sister was in doubt if the duel was really educational. The director said that, of course, the freshmen could choose their opponents. It was also possible to refuse the duel, so they shouldn't feel intimidated. Representatives of the freshmen, feel free to do as you wish. The second-year martial artist, first in the ranking, was called Nando. The other was the second, and his name was Brown. The third in the ranking was called Irina, and the fourth, Karen. They looked at Ronan and could barely contain themselves, wanting to fight right away. He looked at his sister and thought that, since the situation had become like this, he would show her. It would be better if he could show companionship too. He heard that the newcomers could choose their opponents for the duel. So he raised his hand and asked if he could make a suggestion. The director asked, "What suggestion?" Ronan wasn't proposing. He said that, since he was free to choose, he would like to be taught by all the respective veterans. This made everyone frown at him. To complete it, he said he wanted all of them together at the same time. Since that was something innovative, they needed to come together to share their opinions. The director asked Professor Nabariz what she thought of Ronan's suggestion. The academy didn't follow the law that, if they possessed enough abilities, they could do whatever they wanted. It didn't matter who won the duel. It would still have great meaning for everyone. She told the director that, if things got dangerous, she would interfere. The director thought about the case and was warned that they would proceed. All 4 thought it was absurd how much that boy was underestimating someone. There, he asked them to calm down. He was arrogant, but Schliff was certainly very skilled. That was an opponent they couldn't underestimate. They said they would go all out from the beginning. So, everyone had understood. She was finding that atmosphere very chaotic. She shouted to her brother that, if he found it dangerous, he could give up at any moment. He just waved at her, to see if he could calm her down. The director was giving the order for it to begin. He wanted to start the first match between veterans and freshmen. The first veteran was Nando, who went with great thirst to finish off that freshman. Ronan dodged and avoided the blow. He thought they were good, and were a few levels above Maria at that time. The next to attack was Irina, who blocked his attack. Karan asked Irina to duck, and also wanted to attack. Even with both attacking together, they didn't frighten Ronan, who also blocked. He thought their teamwork wasn't bad. To get out of that double attack, he blocked and was still thrown far away. When he was still crouched, he noticed someone was trying to hit him. Brown asked why he was doing that. He wanted to have a fierce duel against him. He didn't realize that Ronan had a quick and powerful blow, as well as sequential attacks. Soon after, they weren't playing around. So, they formed up to corner their opponent. When everyone was prepared to attack, they simply missed an attack, because he had already dodged. Irina found his speed quite reasonable. He thought the Filian Academy was really incredible. Before the 3 even realized it, they had already taken their respective blows. Of the 4 he had targeted, only 3 were directly attacked. Brown was strong. Ronan acknowledged that. He thought he should have ended this type of fight, but he was going to maintain consideration for Brown until the end. So the 2 positioned themselves to continue the fight. However, Seeing the position Ronin was in, he realized he wasn't going to go easy. Ronin was thirsty for victory and was going to finish him off. The position he made was the same that Instructor Neighbor is used. Ronin realized he was afraid of his opponent, made a smile and passed by him. His opponent's sword wasn't enough to withstand the blow. Ronin left there victorious after defeating the 4 veterans, saying he had learned a lot. The arena went wild after seeing what the simple newcomer had done. They were shouting that that newcomer was incredible. They thought he was going to lose, but it all ended in moments. They were wondering if he was really from the first year. Nando said it was so one-sided that he wasn't even sad about losing. Everyone agreed that he was really a monster. Ronin looked at his sister and realized that now she would trust him more. Now he had to show that he was skilled with words. He told them that they had done a good job. He bowed a little to greet them and said he had learned a lot from them. He was placed in that position by the excitement of the challenge passed to the academy. But their strength was undeniable. He was saying that from the bottom of his heart and thanked them for accepting his challenge. He asked, "Please?" for them to forgive his attitude at that moment. He said he was eager to learn even more from them. They moved away a little while talking among themselves about the boy. Then they came to the agreement that they were wrong about him. He was strong and respectful. Brown grabbed him by the arm and said he had fought fairly, using only his skills to win. He squeezed his arm and said that was how a student's attitude at that academy should be. He said he was really incredible. And Arena said he certainly had a lot of energy. He was happy, because he had already shown his social ability to his sister. And now, she wouldn't be worried anymore. A mysterious girl had found him quite interesting. He was sitting in the great hall for the reception banquet. Aesel thought that was too big. Maria said that, being the best institution of all, that was the minimum expected. Aesel asked Ronin if he had seen his sister. He answered yes, and that it took a while to comfort her, since she was very worried about it. He even said he left a citation with her, so she wouldn't need to worry about her safety. Acel thought he was an incredible brother, and Irel said of course he was. When Ronin went to get the piece of meat that was on his plate, coming very quietly, was Schliff. He asked if Ronin thought he could really eat at that time. Looking to the side and seeing him, Ronin couldn't believe he was really there. Ronin got agitated, hit the meat on the plate, breaking it, and asked what he wanted this time. Schliff said it wasn't anything major, he just wanted to check something important. With the agenda in his hand, he asked where Arena lived, and if it was far from there. He wanted to know what the conditions of the path there were, if the security was good, and if there were reports of incidents. He assumed that Ronin had hired the escort. He trusted that he had hired at least an army of mercenaries. Ronin continued agitated and said he had hired several people who were much stronger than he thought. He said that, unless a wave appeared out of nowhere, nothing would happen. Schliff concluded that, if a wave appeared, something could happen. With each moment that passed, Ronin became more agitated. He asked why his sister's life mattered so much. He asked him what he thought he was. Schliff answered that he was just worried about the girl who had become his friend. He said it was a knight's duty. A girl arrived and said that scene was very interesting, since she had never seen the Grancia wolf so talkative before, nothing friendly. Schliff asked what she wanted with him. The young woman who appeared there and showed interest in their conversation was Elizabeth Akal Lucia. With an air of importance, she told him not to be mistaken. He wasn't the person who possessed her interest, but rather Ronin. Ronin was startled, pointed to himself and asked if it was him. He asked why. Schliff said it must be her unpleasant habit again. He told Akal Lucia that he had already finished things there, so she should do whatever she wanted. Not satisfied, he turned to Ronin and asked if he should send guards from his family. Ronin asked him to leave and not interfere. Aesel warned Ronin that that was the person from before, and he said he didn't need to explain. He knew she was powerful, and radically powerful. Akal Lucia said that those who raised their claws needed a lesson. She told Ronin that she knew he understood what she meant, and he said he had no idea. She said she had become quite interested in his talent, so she would make a proposal. It was a special offer that a mere criminal would never dream of receiving. She showed him a necklace with a violet stone in the middle. That was Akal Lucia's invitation. Akal Lucia was different from most nobles, who prioritized blood. They prioritized talent above all else. They offered an opportunity for those who possessed potential to become part of the family. The symbol of that opportunity was that, a necklace with a violet stone inside. Ronin wanted to know if she was allowed to give that to another person. She said that, if she was asking, it was because she should know that yes. he heard from a person while passing by. Then his thoughts returned to another life, when he talked with the commander. She showed him the invitation, saying that, with that, even being a commoner, he could become part of a great family. When he asked if it was like the great commander, she replied that it was. The commander was Deshan Akal Lucia. She told him that, of course, he would need to pass a test set by the patriarch. But with his talent, that wouldn't be a problem. Told him to keep that in mind. Once he atoned for his sins through deeds in war, he might end up receiving one of those, because she thought he was very talented. Returning to the present moment, he looked at that necklace symbolizing the invitation from Akal Lucia. She said that if he already knew about it, then there was no need to explain. She hoped he would make the right choice. Elizabeth told him that even if he was born a beast, if he stayed close to sheep long enough, he could become one. She and her group left from there. Aesel felt more at ease after she was gone. Ronan realized that the twins really did whatever they wanted. At least it was good that he had a contact now. The Akal Lucius could be useful to him. Everything there depended on grades. The atmosphere could change drastically. The clearest example of that was the dormitory system, the place where intermediate-level students were placed. It was Salon Netian. Each person had a clean room, a high-end coffee maker, and it was an incredible dormitory with everything one needed. On the very first day, the CTIR hall usually started with some student shouting about why they had to stay in that place if they were nobles. The person in charge apologized for not having servants to attend to the crater hall. It was 4 people per room, and the cafeteria, shower, and bathroom were all shared. The person in charge couldn't do anything. Those were the academy's rules. And they didn't need to look at him like that. They just had to study to get out of there. Otherwise, they'd stay for another semester. Also, in the end, the top students, including Ronan, were placed in the Barfer Hall, which could be summed up in one sentence. It was too amazing. Ronan was stunned when he saw that luxurious room. He had saved records of the classes explained earlier. He needed to choose the classes he liked and wanted to attend the most. It was important to adjust during the first year. Then he heard it wasn't good to choose too many. It was a common misunderstanding for a first year who hadn't yet experienced hell. Ronan got excited and chose almost all of them. Since he was there, he would study. On the first day, he was excused from the basic fencing class. The tutor told him there was nothing left to teach him. He had already performed. The academy's rules allowed a student to be excused from a class if they had already learned everything. And if he stayed, it could demotivate the others, and they'd lose their drive. So he was excused. He was sitting by the lake with his sword stuck in the ground. Very sad. He couldn't believe that was all such a prestigious academy had to offer. He was excused from target practice, monster hunting, and kicked out of all the classes. Frustrated, he thought it was nothing like what he had imagined. Someone approached and said he looked familiar, asking if he shouldn't be in class. When Ronan turned, he realized it was Instructor Nabus. From her look, she could tell he had already finished all his classes. He replied yes, very sadly, and asked if all the classes were going to be like that. He thought the academy would be better than that. She understood, and just one glance was all he needed to copy her technique. So, as a teacher, she couldn't turn a blind eye and asked for his sword. When she looked at it, she asked what he thought, and taught him a very important lesson. Looking at his broken sword, she said something like, "That couldn't be called a weapon. It would only hinder the user's power." She told him to watch carefully, and lightly placed her hand on his sword. She performed, and he watched. She unleashed a strike that made the lake's water rise high, as if it were raining. Looking at him, she asked if he could figure out what was missing. A sword is a piece of hard and sharp metal, used to fight against opponents. Disposable, or that's what he thought until he saw that. It was a perfect technique. He thought that was ridiculous. He was sure that she used the sword in her hands. He knew the cut was the same, but how was the power so different just because of the weapon? She said that the waste of strength was what determined if he lived or not, and if he were using mana, it was essential that he find a weapon that suited him. She said that was not something he could understand since he didn't use mana. He asked if she already knew. She said yes, but the fact that he possessed so much energy was truly incredible. She said that one day he would be able to use mana. So, to use that power correctly, he would need a weapon. She told him that he must have many things on his mind. She asked him to go with her to a class. He asked if he could say yes, even though normally only those above the second year were allowed. She said that, instead of that piece of metal, he should bring a real sword. He and Maria were with Ronan. He was on the first day of free class. The place Schliff mentioned when he gave him the symbol. That was the forge. Maria thought the place looked a bit run down. It didn't seem like it would last long. They asked Ronan if he was sure he wanted to rent the place that a renowned family frequented. He said they would know as soon as they entered. Inside it was even worse. That was no lie. Someone appeared and opened the door, saying it was very noisy and that he was sleeping. He asked who he was and why they were making so much noise so early. Didn't they see the fire was out? Ronan found another interesting sight. A beast man in a forge, but he was not in a good mood. He asked if they were deaf. He asked why they were there, and to hurry up with the answer. Showing the family medallion, Ronan said that Schliff had recommended that place. He said that the weapons from there were the best. Then he recognized the Grancia family symbol. Being quite rude, the beastman asked if just because he showed that, he thought he was from the Grancia family. He said he didn't know who had leaked that information about the place, but he didn't accept clients like him. Ronan got angry and refused to leave without his sword. The beastman, licking his lips, said there was another way. It was just to give an arm of that little boy over there. He said he was getting hungry, so why didn't he do that? He was wanting to eat his arm. He said it didn't taste very good. While Ronan checked the beastman's mouth, then he called him again and told him he had crossed the line. He unsheathed his sword and launched a strike. Ronan said he knew at the moment that it seemed strange. Then he asked where that had come from out of nowhere. Now, the beastman was wearing armor that appeared as soon as he was attacked. Holding the sword, he said it didn't matter that it was something like that. He just needed everything. The beastman asked him to wait a little longer and explained it was just a test. Ronan found it strange and asked the reason for the test. He explained it was a test for all new clients. It was a protocol to test their abilities, and he also needed to test the invisible armor. Then he said he provoked him on purpose. He said he had no intention of hurting any of them. Ronan wasn't convinced if he should believe that. He said that if he had any doubts, he just had to talk to Schliff later. He said it was a good process for a calm death. The beastman tried to explain that wasn't the case. He looked at him and apologized. He called him friend. He said he didn't hurt people, so he didn't need to worry. He said that anyway, he was from Deka, and that he was an apprentice at that forge, and sometimes the gatekeeper. He asked the boy's name, who answered Ronan. Then he said that Ronan was after a weapon. Didk said he would show the way. That was just the entrance to the forge, that the real place was there. When they were already somewhere, he asked if they were well settled. He asked them to prepare themselves mentally and pressed a button. The gears started to work. Then they started to descend, carried by something. Ronan asked what it was. He said it was an elevator made with a magic stone and a pulley. Then he said that was the biggest and best forge in the capital. That was Carp Duke. I never imagined that something like this could exist underground. Didc told Ronan to get excited, as he had passed the test, and he would be responsible for taking him to the best master blacksmith in the entire capital. A place so complete like that, Ronan never imagined it existed. To think there would be such a large place beneath the capital. When he looked at everything, he found it very incredible. In fact, that forge supplied items to the royal families and some nobles, without any discrimination. All the skilled masters were there. However, the one who received the title of best was the dwarf Yahello, who lived there. Of course, he is a master who has been melting metal for hundreds of years. Didk explained that the old man could be a difficult person, but the possibilities were incomparable. Opening the door with his feet, very disrespectfully, he went in. He asked for the old man. Passing by several weapons on the floor, he said he had brought a guest. He said that, by the commotion at the entrance, it could only be Deka. He said he had already warned him to be quiet and work, but he really didn't listen. He tried to explain himself, saying he couldn't do anything. There were weapons at the door, so he wasn't managing to open it. He told him to imitate that place. He said that Roni's elder complained too much. The elder told him he had already brought guests. He was going to assume they weren't bad. All boastful, he said that he himself had tested them, and that his sword skills were great. The elder found that unexpected. Judging by his appearance, he seemed to be a child. He asked him to show his swordsmanship, as he could tell several things about it just by looking. When he started to unpack his sword, Ronan took a good look at his sword. Then he looked and asked, "What is this garbage?" He asked if he had carried that around as a weapon all this time. The three of them got scared when the blacksmith struck his hammer and broke his sword. Ronan got very stressed and asked what he was doing. Then he pointed and said he could use anyone from there. He said that, with a terrible sword, he wouldn't be able to show his true skills. He said he wanted to give him any sword he chose, for free, so he shouldn't feel wronged. And he said that anyone he chose would be hundreds of times better than that garbage. As Ronan said nothing, he just stared at the two of them. Upon choosing another one, he realized the situation was totally different. He just didn't know if it would really be that different. He went on to explain that it wouldn't be his fault if he damaged or destroyed something. He said he didn't care. If he wanted what he wanted, he just wanted him to give the strike of his life. Then Ronan remembered the strike his teacher had made. He breathed and started to imitate the strike. The elder, when he saw the strike, noticed at first what it was about. Already prepared, Ronan released the attack. It was a perfect strike, so perfect that it was seen from several miles away. The people from the other forge were worried about Yahello with Ronan. It wasn't even noon and he was already making a mess. Upon seeing the damage, they thought a furnace had exploded. Ronan himself was startled by the extent of the damage. He himself asked what had just happened. The elder said that technique was Nabi Rose's. Then he asked if he was her apprentice. When Ronan asked if he knew instructor Nabi Rose, the elder said it was he who made her sword. He became much more interested and excited, because that sword was stupidly long. Ronan's elder recounted that that was the mysterious sword she had used, one of the few masterpieces he had forged in his entire life. He thought Ronan was a novice and couldn't judge his own abilities. He said it had been a long time since he had met someone with so much talent. The elder said it was also a problem that he was so talented. That would make it difficult to forge something for him. As he could see, the swords from there couldn't withstand his strikes. Ronan asked what he should do. He said he would need at least the byproduct of a wyvern. Ronan took it from his pocket and asked, "How about this?" He wasn't sure if it worked, so he had it with him. Ronan's elder found that eggshell strange, but went to test it. He was impressed when he realized the mithril hammer couldn't even scratch a mere nutshell. That kind of material really existed. He was fascinated and asked if he could really use something so valuable like that. Ronan said that for him it was useless, and asked if that was really enough for a sword. Ronan said yes, and that they should return in 2 weeks. He said he would make for him the best sword in the Empire, and Ronan was eager to return there. Ronan spoke to the two who were already there, asking why they wouldn't go look for the other masters. Ronan said that he couldn't send the friends of someone so valuable away empty-handed. He would like to do something, but he couldn't do anything more than melt that thing. The three of them were impressed by that gentleman's determination. A little below, there were some people in white robes who were bothered by the noise. They wanted to incinerate everything at once. However, one of them asked them to hold back, as it was not the time to reveal themselves. He said there wasn't much more left, and that they could start with those ignorant blacksmiths. With them, they seemed to see stone monsters. On the day they would see the light, everything in that empire would disappear, and it would be consumed by the light that was coming. Some days later, when he was walking carefree, he thought that the blacksmith had said it would be the best sword in the empire. Both Essel and Maria had managed to place their orders with the other blacksmiths. It was going to be a bit expensive, but it didn't matter much. The money wasn't his. If there was any problem, it was the time for the sword to be ready. What would he do until then? Essel and Maria were in class at that moment. He realized he had arrived at the training center, which gave exclusive classes to veterans at the Gay Olan facility. He was sure that instructor Nabi Rose's classes were also there. She told him to go with a real weapon, but he already had something to use temporarily, so he thought he could go. He realized she was very close to him. He turned his face slowly and greeted me, who was sure I had told him to show up there as soon as he got a weapon. She asked if he was skipping class and he was pulled by the ear. He tried to explain that he had a good reason. She told him to forget it and go with her. She said she would listen to his excuses. On the way, he shouted that he had understood, and she could let him go. Someone was watching that commotion from the window. A girl wanted to know what was happening. Another young man came and bumped into her, asking why she was blocking the way in front of him. She immediately apologized to him and said she was a little distracted. Cardin told her that if she had time to stand there, she might as well go to class, since she was a loser. She said she was going and left for the first duel room. The instructor was introducing Ronan. She said he had made a mess. She said she would introduce him once more, showing that he would be part of that class from that day on. He introduced himself and said he was from the first year of martial arts, that it was a pleasure to meet all of them. One of the boys there asked if he was that first-year student who had come in first place. They didn't think he was that good, as he looked like a baby. Ronan was thinking that he could hear that. But there were also faces there that were friendly. Others not so much. A girl arrived apologizing for being late. Ronan recognized that voice immediately. She said she needed to resolve something. That's why she was late. She was very nervous, apologizing for being late. The instructor said it was all right. She said she had just introduced the newcomer. The assistant arrived and told Ronan it was a pleasure to meet him. He said he was in the second year of martial arts. He was an assistant in that class. And that his name was Adasan. He said it was a pleasure to meet him. He had found the great commander Adasan Kal Lucia de Ferro. The goddess had no blood in her body, only pure iron. Who would imagine that great commander could smile like that? Of course, she didn't possess the memories of regression. So that was the true great commander. There was the request she had made before, that he not let her do anything stupid and become evil. He didn't know what to do. That was a big problem. Since earlier, when he went to see her posture there, everyone treated her like a slave. She managed on her own to do all the tasks. Carden approached Ronan and asked if he wanted to duel. He didn't ask the reason for a sudden duel. Carden replied that it was out of nowhere. He introduced himself, said his name was Carden, and that he was in the third year. He heard about how amazing he was during the exam. Were those rumors true? He would love to learn from him. However, Ronan told him he was very busy with something else. Pretending to be nice, he said he had challenged him to a duel, but he didn't even bring a weapon. Then he called Deand a loser. He told her to bring his practice spear. She replied that she would bring it in a minute. Ronan didn't like hearing him say she was a loser, especially him, who looked like just an animal. She brought the staff and handed it to him. He called her an idiot and said she brought the long spear, but he had been using the short one for a while. He asked if she was talking back. It didn't even make sense for an assistant to be that dumb. And he hit her hard on the head. After that, he said she didn't even have the right to participate in that class, that she only managed to participate after begging a lot. He asked if she was silly like that, or if she was just pretending. She apologized. He wouldn't stop, getting tired of it. Ronan held the staff and faced him. He said they would duel, if that's what he wanted. If it wasn't like that, he didn't know what he would end up doing. Carden asked him what that was he was saying. Ronan asked which part he wasn't understanding. Meeting his gaze, he said they would resolve that in a duel. Carden found that unexpected. He asked Ronan if he had heard correctly, and what he hadn't understood. Leaning into Ronan, he asked if he was doing that because of that loser. He said he didn't even know who she was, with a mocking voice. He asked if it was because both were commoners. He asked if by any chance he was one of the siblings and didn't know. Ronan threw the staff to him and told him to shut up and get going, if he didn't want to end up dying. Then he just touched the tip of the staff to his chest. Cardan didn't know how he could put so much force without using mana. Ronan threw him very far. Don said he was complaining about not wanting to use the spear, because it was long, so he shortened it for him. Seeing Cardan with the two parts of the spear in his hand, he asked if he was enjoying it. However, Cardan didn't like it at all. He thought it was a lot of audacity from someone like him. In a fit of fury, he said he would show him the place where people like him should stay. While screaming and running to attack, Ronan just watched. Cardan shouted, asking if he thought he would be fine after doing that. Ronan, after slicing his spear, said he would be fine, and told him to worry more about himself. He gave him an attack to stop him from showing off. The blow hit him right in the face. Then, other blows came. He was preparing and striking, one blow after another, until the opponent fell to the ground. Ronan looked at him and told him to be grateful, because they were at the academy. If they were somewhere else, it would be worse. Everyone around said that Cardan, who was highly ranked among them, had lost. Ronan wasn't kidding. He asked who there would be next. Then he called shamelessly and said he was holding the towel. Looking, he said that if the towel stank, he should wash it. Why was he making someone else do it? He asked if they thought by any chance the assistant was his servant. Then he said he was going to break her nose. Dean asked him to stop. She stepped in front and said she didn't know why he was doing that. But it wasn't necessary. Everything was fine. He asked the assistant to please get out of the way, and that he could hold back when it was other things, but not when they belittled her. He thought that neither those idiots, nor anyone, at least in the Empire, should treat someone like that. Again, he asked her to get out of the way. He didn't plan to stop until he had beaten all of them. Instructor Nabi Rose told Ronan to stop. She said she wouldn't hold him responsible for the duel, as accidents can happen in real battles. However, if he continued with that behavior, she wouldn't let it slide. She told him to drop the sword and step away. When she realized her body didn't want to move, she looked back a little. She realized that was a serpent. She thought he was unprecedented, even with the Sword Saint. Instructor Nabi Rose's aura looked like a giant serpent. She told Ronan that what he was about to do was not considered a duel. As responsible for that class, she couldn't let the class get out of control. Ronan said she should know that her assistant was going through that kind of thing, and that until now, she had only observed and done nothing. The instructor said that was the last warning. She told him to stop. He told her it didn't matter if he was a sword saint or not. His answer would be the same. Looking into her eyes, he said he would beat all of them. She said that then, there was nothing to do. He gave her no choice. She launched the Serpent of Affliction. Then he seemed to be trapped in the illusion of a dream, or something like that. Called by the great commander, he asked why she had volunteered for the commander position, when everyone else had refused. She replied that one day he would understand that there are things you couldn't force anyone to do. She said it was destiny. That's how she answered what she was thinking. Then he found himself surrounded by that pile of people. He didn't know she was carrying all that on her shoulders. He heard her voice calling for him, saying she was very sorry for giving him that burden. She told him not to forgive her. Then he woke up screaming and realized it was all just a terrible nightmare. That familiar voice called for him and asked what had happened. She asked if he had had a nightmare, and he called her Great Commander. He woke up confused and saw the assistant instructor in front of him, thinking she was the Great Commander. He realized what he did and made up some excuse. He asked if he was in the infirmary. She said yes, that the instructor asked her to take him there. The instructor left a message. She wanted to correct his audacity. From that day on, during supplementary classes, Ronan, upon seeing that, realized he was in serious trouble. Deshawn had a doubt and asked if, by any chance, he had gotten angry with her. He said he got angry because he was sensitive to etiquette and because he was a respectable knight. She asked him to include Cardon, so as not to hate any of them so much, since it wasn't like she understood their feelings. She just asked him not to get stressed out again, asking if it was something she should be saying, as she dedicated herself a lot as an assistant. He didn't ask why she chose to be an assistant in that class. She said she went easy on the students, and they did that because of her situation. But what about the instructor, who was seeing all that and doing nothing but watching? Deshawn explained that part too, said the reason she didn't do anything was because she herself had asked. He asked why she would do something so stupid like that, if she was already receiving special treatment and thought she didn't deserve it. She said that moreover, she was a year behind, and that she had just started to control mana now. He found it hard to believe, as the great commander possessed such an incredible aura. He thought she had been through something like that. The girl continued, saying she asked the instructor, privately, not to interfere. Since they were accepting her as an assistant, she didn't want to be an extra burden. And of course, that she could handle that burden. She said she could endure that as many times as necessary. Even so, she thanked Ronan for helping. She thought she had gotten used to everything, but Cardon was hard on her, and it hurt a little. He asked if the reason she was going so far was to become a great commander. She brought her hand to her mouth, incredulous, and asked if it was that obvious. She said that was it. She was just very ashamed and couldn't say it with pride. But it was her dream to become a great commander of the Empire. She said that, of course, for someone who wasn't experienced yet, she knew they would say something like that. She could always hear it. But still, she wouldn't give up. She was doing her best every day. Saying that, she looked at her hands, all calloused. She said goodbye, as it was time for the next class. She told him to rest a bit, and then go back to class. He thanked the senior for helping. She said he didn't need to worry, and that she would see him in the next one. He stayed there a little longer, thinking about what to do. He looked at the seat where he was sitting, and only thoughts came to his mind. He remembered the commander's words, telling him not to let her do anything stupid. Now he didn't know what to do. Some days later, on the weekend of the forge entrance to the Great Carp Doke, Ronan, Maria, and Yahello were at the forge entrance, waiting to be attended to. He realized there was no one there. If they weren't going to attend to him, why did they bother sending a notice on Messenger in the middle of the night? The note said the sword was his greatest work and that he could pick it up. He was dissatisfied with the treatment he was receiving there. He started kicking the things that were in the way. Maria asked Yahello if he knew why Ronan was so sensitive. He said he didn't know. He thought something was happening in class. She said she wouldn't wait for him anymore. They would go in themselves. Maria wanted to know if they could really do that. He said they were the ones who called them, so they could. In the elevator, he was looking for where it was activated. He found the place to access the elevator. The three of them were already on their way. He was indignant and thought that old man didn't know the basics of customer service. He was angry when the elevator reached its destination. He realized everything was engulfed in flames. Several of them had already been taken by the fire and hadn't resisted. Yahello drew his attention to something that looked like a stone giant. That giant was chasing some blacksmiths. As he didn't know why there was a stone giant there, Yahello said the blacksmiths would be caught soon. He held Yahello and was prepared to jump. He told Maria to bring instructors or anyone she found. Then he jumped from there with Yahello, going back for him to use telekinesis. He used an invisible hand. The blacksmiths, tired of running, fell to the ground, thinking that was how everything would end. The flash of a huge attack, which shattered the stone giant, was seen by those blacksmiths. Ronan was just very stressed lately, with many things on his mind, and that would serve to relieve it. He told the stone giants their little party was over. One of them prepared to attack Ronan. Even being close to the attack, Ronan still didn't move and waited for the right moment. When the time came, he simply counterattacked and managed to defeat that stone giant. Its head fell to the ground from its body, making a noise and raising a lot of dust. The blacksmiths realized that he was Dronzer's guest, who had come the other day. Up there on the stone monster, he asked them to explain what happened. He wanted to know exactly what was happening there. Coming down from the stone giant were the two blacksmiths and Yahello with Ronan. After telling everything, he asked if several stone giants had appeared suddenly. They said yes, and that they didn't know the cause. They appeared suddenly somewhere underground and started to destroy everything. All the blacksmiths were caught, including Dronzer, and they went back to where the giants, came from. They said that Kanan went after them, but he was not a good fighter. If it continued like this, Ronan said they would become food. He understood that there were no more of them there. One of the blacksmiths said that he had killed the last one. Ronan asked Yahello that, until Maria returned with reinforcements, he looked for those who were injured. He said that, if he found any, he was to heal them. He would also leave Sita to be able to provide first aid without problems. Yahello was worried about Ronan. He said he was going to save those who were taken, and also had something he needed to get from Dronzer. Dronzer was thanking Dick's bravery. He said that he didn't need to risk his life, and that he also didn't need to be there. Dick asked him to run off, but the blacksmith wanted to know if his invisible armor would hold. Angrily, he said that many things were happening there, and that he couldn't stop to keep saying things. He said that if he had the strength to keep saying ridiculous things, why didn't he swing the sword? Dronzer said he couldn't. That sword was the greatest masterpiece. He couldn't damage it with his poor swordsmanship. Dick was thinking he was crazy. He really thought he was a weapons lunatic. That was too much. And that stone giant was coming at them. One of them raised its hand very high to crush them, and brought that heavy hand down with all its might on Dick. Dronzer, upon seeing the giant hit, got very scared and feared for his friend's life. He was stronger than he thought, and managed to withstand the punch that stone giant gave, without causing major damage. But the defense enchantment of his armor had run out, and the giant was preparing for another attack. He thought that, if he had known he was going to die, he would have done what he wished. He had so many regrets. When the giant was about to attack and end Dick's life, it was sliced by Ronan's blade, which cut it into pieces. He told Dick that he had done a good job, but he could leave the rest to him, and told him to rest a bit. In front of him, there were several stone giants, but he didn't care. He placed himself in front of them to defend them. Dick asked how he got there so fast. There should have been giants in the way. He said he finished all of them, and saved the other blacksmiths. Dick said that wasn't even possible. Ronan asked them to stop talking about useless things. He asked Dronzer to give him the sword. The thing he was calling a masterpiece was the sword, so he should hand it over. Dronzer was somewhat obsessed with it. However, he handed it over and said the hilt was still missing. It was incomplete, but he could use it anyway. Ronan was eager to see how good it was and had perfect victims in front of him. some stone giants. One of them stretched out its hand towards Ronan to try to grab him. He was thinking if he should swing it a bit. In the end, he chose to swing and unleashed his power in an extraordinary blow. He finished off those giants in just one blow, which left him perplexed, and the two blacksmiths dumbfounded. He even asked what marvel that was. Daron asked what he thought of Lancha. He said that was its name, inspired by a favorite dreamer. He was very happy to have managed to make a wonderful work. It was light. You couldn't even feel the weight in your hands. Daron hadn't even put an enchantment on it, as it had a trait that restored received damage by absorbing blood. He thought it was because the material had been made from ribbon eggshell. Ronan told the blacksmith that he was more incredible than he thought, and Daron was happy that Ronan liked the sword so much. Daedk wanted to get out of there soon and said they were the only ones, so there shouldn't be anyone else to save. Ronan asked him to take Daron and get out of there. He needed to check something. He said it was nothing much, but he thought there was a rat hiding there, and it was a very big rat. Daedk wanted to know what he meant by the rat. Ronan said there was something strange. He knew the habits of stone giants, and they are not known for being hostile. Ronan was analyzing from behind their heads. Daron and Daedk were finding his attitude strange. After looking, he found a very suspicious mark. It was a magic circle. If you've made it this far and want more, leave it in the comments. That's all for today. See you later, folks.